Welcome to From Betrayal to Breakthrough. I'm Dr. Debbie Silber, and today's guest is Cynthia Thurlow. Cynthia Thurlow is a globally recognized expert in nutrition and intermittent fasting, highly sought after speaker, CEO, and founder of Everyday Wellness Project. She's a nurse practitioner for 20 plus years, is a 2 times TEDx speaker. Her second talk on intermittent fasting has been viewed nearly 6 million times. She's been featured on ABC, Fox 5, KTLA, CW, and in Medium and Entrepreneur. She's also the host of Everyday Wellness Podcast, which was listed as 20 podcasts that will help you grow in 2020 by Entrepreneur Magazine. So, what does mindset have to do with the choices you make, how you interpret experiences, and what you do with the lessons you learn? Well, just about everything. My next guest and friend, Cynthia Thurlow, is going to share how we can squash limiting beliefs. We're going to be talking about how we identify, interpret, and turn around limiting beliefs, and so much more. You're going to love this conversation. Here's Cynthia. Okay, everybody, you are going to so love this topic because I have my friend Cynthia Thurlow with us, and we're going to be talking about squashing limiting beliefs and how my mind is everything. Welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been really looking forward to this.
Oh, we're so glad your mindset is so huge. I don't know if there's a topic where mindset isn't important.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems to affect everything and everything. But where did you look back to? I just want to, if it's okay, just go back in time just a bit. What threw off your mind, or what created a set of limiting beliefs for you that you knew you needed to or want to undo? Where did that start?
Gosh, I think as a child, I was I was one of the first latchkey kids, child of the 70s and the 80s. And my parents got divorced when I was in second grade. And so I instantly realized I was part of a club I didn't want to be part of. I mean, no child wants their parents to get divorced. And so, I had to kind of set about putting things in place so that I could navigate, recognizing as a 7-year-old child, your friends aren't in a position where they can talk about what you're going through. So my parents had me in therapy to talk about all these things. And I have parents who did the best they could. I have an alcoholic father who was a fully functioning alcoholic. I like to say that he always had a job and always helped pay the bills. And for that, I'm very grateful, and certainly instilled some good things in me. I had a mom single mom, really hard to do. But my parents are pretty difficult people. And so I learned at a very young age that I always call it free roaming childhood. And I was a good kid. I got good grades, but I realized pretty early on that I had to kind of create a safe environment for me to be in. Safe environment, meaning I spent a lot of time by myself, even though I had a younger sibling. We were 4.5 years apart. But it was hard to talk to people about what I was experiencing. And certainly my grandmothers and my aunts, really kind of stepped in and provided, the structure that I definitely needed under those circumstances. But I think when it comes to limiting beliefs, stemming from that is that because I didn't grow up in an ideal circumstance, dealing with abuse, dealing with, alcoholism, and, a lot of verbal abuse, I think you're either going to do one of two things. You're either going to rally and you're going to develop, healthy coping mechanisms to exist in that environment, or you're going to end up the opposite direction. And so from a very young age, I knew that I would move away from where I grew up. I knew that I was very specific about, what types of goals I had for myself and doing all the things to kind of set myself in motion. So when it comes to, limiting beliefs, if I were to listen to what the things that my father said to me, that would definitely have kind of fueled that development. And I always say I'm feisty, and that's my nature in general. Someone tells me I can't do something, and I mean this in a healthy way. Someone tells me I can't do something, I'm sure as heck going to do it. I'm going to do it really well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think from a very young age, I kind of developed coping skills in healthy ways that developed me into the person that I am today. And so I'm happy to say I, many ways, worked beyond what was, what I was told was the way that I was going to end up, because I was my mother's kid, I was going to end up one way, or my father's child. And so I just didn't play into that at all.
Right, which is so amazing because we're so influenced, especially around age. What meaning did you make out of it back and like what did you take from it? Because it's so easy to say, I'm not going to do this, or I'm going to be different or whatever. But at the time, was there something where you said, no, doesn't feel, this doesn't feel true, doesn't
Mhm.
feel right?
Yeah,
What
I
did you
mean,
experience?
yeah, I mean, I think for me, I always had really good girlfriends, even at a young age, and I think that combined with my both my grandmothers who played a huge role in my life. I truly think that when I reflect back on all that, I don't even think I knew what I was doing. Meaning, I don't think I was entirely aware that I was trying to create coping mechanisms and resiliency skills that would guide me throughout my lifetime. I always said, like, I always was ready to take a leap, and so going away to college, making sure I didn't stay in the state of New Jersey, and no offense to any of my good friends that are still
Mhm.
there, but for me to be healthy, I needed to do some things that were different. And so that's kind of the path that I set in motion. I didn't do what was expected of me. Yes, I was expected to go to college. I was not expected to go away to college. And so I made very calculated decisions that at the time I didn't 100% understand why I did them, but I wanted a completely different environment than where I grew up. And so that meant I had to get away, and just, really, the concept of reinventing yourself. I didn't do the things that everyone expected me to do per se, but I did things that I think were sometimes a little harder. I think sometimes it's easy for us to fall into patterns because it's less effort. And so I don't have problems, I usually refer to as taking a left turn, and I'll give you an example. I was pre-law as an undergrad and had told everyone all the way along, I'm going to law school. I'm going to law school. Well, I took my LSATs and I had my sights on two universities. I was going there. There's no question. I had the grades. I did not get the LSAT scores that would have gotten that. I did get into some good law schools, but not the ones I wanted to. And it caused me to pause. And by pausing, it was actually really advantageous because it gave me an opportunity to consider other options. And so I would have loved going to law school, but it was, obviously a huge financial investment even back then. Decided to go work for a Fortune 500 company, and then ended up taking pre-med classes. And that's the direction I was supposed to go in. So were my parents stunned when I went back to school to take pre-med classes? Yes. Were my friends stunned? Yes. But I ended up exactly where I was meant to be. So I think, for anyone that's listening, we have to give ourselves the freedom to make decisions that perhaps don't seem that they're, necessarily 100% right. I always say if I had a crystal ball, I would have known I was heading exactly the direction I was meant to be in. But by the same token, I think because I didn't limit myself in terms of thinking about where I could be, I didn't know I'd be a good nurse. I didn't know I'd be a great NP, but it was absolutely positively a better, occupational choice, more aligned. I'm very heart-centered. And I always
Mhm.
say, for someone who doesn't like to argue, I'm not sure why I wanted to go to law school. So I ended up exactly where I was meant to be, and could not have made a better choice.
It's so, I'm so glad you said that, because it happens so often where we're sort of placed on this one path, and it's
Mhm.
based on a whole lot of shoulds. I should do this.
Mhm.
I should do that. This is expected of me. This is just what, everybody says I should be doing, or whatever. And I had a very similar thing. I had a double major in TV production, broadcast journalism. I mean,
Wow.
that was my path. And it's amazing. It's when we're heart centered and just really looking to help. I remember what made the difference for me was I was sitting in edit room till 4 in the morning. It wasn't fulfilling at all. And then there one project where I was actually helping people. I said, oh
Mhm.
wait, there's something really great about that. And
Mhm.
when we let go of that fear enough to say, what would happen if I make that left turn, like you said. And with me, I had 10 years worth of college loans to back,
Yeah.
but that was the beginning of
Mhm.
just totally different path. It's following that into it. You brought something else up too. I remember Tony Robbins telling a story
Mhm.
about, everybody knows who listens. I botch a story, but this is the general idea, that there was this dad, and he was in jail. And he did all the bad things, and he had two kids, and one kid was incredibly successful,
Mhm.
great family business, great life altogether, and the other one turned just like him, really just like the
Mhm.
dad. And he asked the one that was in jail and really went down that path, and he said, well, look at my dad, what choice did I have? And he
Mhm.
and then he looked at the other, and he said, you're doing so beautiful, doing so well, what an amazing life. Why? And he said, well, look at my dad, what choice did I have?
Right. Exactly.
Right. And that's what you're
Exactly.
speaking to, where you can live into it. Or, in my own situation growing up, I looked at it like just imagine I'm dyslexic, where I
Mhm.
know how to regurgitate what I learned. But if I'm going to make this change, and this is what you said about how it's harder, you almost have to unjumble what you
Yes.
learned in order to come out with something different.
Yeah.
So I love that you did. So then it put you on this different path. And then how did you see all of these skills that you learned? How did you see that play out? How did they help you? How did it support you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was probably not until I was in my 20s that I really acknowledged, because peers would say to me, like, you're just unusual in the way that you set your mind to something and you make it happen, and you don't make excuses. You just do the hard work. I spent most of my 20s, this is a super exciting topic, most of my 20s as a student. So when I tell you, by the time I finished my nurse practitioner program, I was exhausted from being a student, but I love to learn. And I'm oftentimes just awed by the amount of the kinds of people that I had the opportunity to work with and work around, and students. But I truly feel like it's this internal locus of control. I feel like I have control over me. I may not have control over a lot of other things, but I am steering the ship. So I never made excuses for what I was doing. I would always say, I just need to do this better next time. And I'm not a perfectionist, thank goodness. But when I reflect back, I think it was the faith that I had in myself, because I had, again, the close girlfriends and a very matriarchal family that supported me, loved me, encouraged me, were my biggest cheerleaders. And I think that made a lot of difference. When my dad was saying really hurtful, horrible things, I would just tune in. And after a while, it was almost like I was tone deaf to what he said. And I said, my gosh, if I ever were to have listened to what you had said to me, if I really had taken it to heart, and some people do. And so I want to be really clear, I'm just feisty. So in my mind, I was like, you're telling me I can't do something, and I'm going to prove that I can.
Mm.
And so I do believe that it helped me have the confidence and the courage and the strength and fortitude, because I haven't always made the easiest choices. And case in point is that I worked as an NP for 16 years, became disillusioned about probably 10 years before then, but I had children at home. And so I didn't have the energetic capacity, the emotional capacity to do something new. But 4 years ago, I did take a leap of faith. Again, another left turn, became an entrepreneur. And now it's clearer to me than ever that, that desire to learn, that desire to persevere, that desire to challenge myself, all those resiliency skills all stem from the way that I grew up. And much to your point about that story that you shared, I always remind people, Father's Day for me is always hard, in the sense that I don't feel a tremendous affinity for my father. I am respectful. He gets a birthday card. He gets acknowledged on the holidays. I do speak with him. We do have a pleasant relationship. But Father's Day for me is challenging, but it also, for me, in many ways, provided me with a blueprint of what not to look for when I got married, what not to desire in a partner. And obviously my spouse could not be more different. Obviously, both very intelligent men, could not be more different. And so for me, I feel like the gift I got was, I wanted to be the kind of parent that I didn't have. And I got to see mirroring both in men and women of what not to do as a parent. And so that's a gift. I think a lot of people might see it otherwise. Some people, it's the glass half full, glass half empty. But for me, I see it as a tremendous gift. And I remind my boys every once in a while, I'll say to them, gosh, you're so lucky. You have such a wonderful father. You have a dad that's interested in you and is supportive and kind and loving, and is a great example of how a man is supposed to be. And of course, they don't get it. They're still, they're young enough, they don't get it, but one day they will. And so that's the gift. And I'm not a Pollyanna, but I am a positive person. And I do believe that we manifest into our lives, whatever we would ultimately, whatever we desire. But if I'm worried, and if I'm scarcity mindset, and if I'm, abiding and embracing limiting beliefs, I won't be the best person I can be. So for me, it just isn't something I even consider. Like I just don't even let my mind go there. I'm always thinking, like, how do I get from point A to point B? And how do I do that and do it in a respectful, loving way, and do it with integrity? So,
There are so many amazing things you said. We could go down so many roads right now. But I love the strength and the clarity and how strategic you've been. And this is a conscious process. And I think so often we're just strolling along and we don't realize this, but in not being really aware of what's going on, we're sort of, flowing down that dream to somewhere I absolutely don't want to go. But it's in being very, very aware, is this working for me? Is this representing who I want to be or who I want to be with? The answer is no. It's a very conscious awareness to say, okay, well, that person is very similar, so I'm ready for this. That's not the least bit of what I'm looking for. It's also, this conscious awareness is so clear, this clarity, and also the clarity to say, I'm doing this because I'm raising my kids, and I can't make that change right now. But it doesn't feel right enough to say, okay, let me venture to now when I do have the opportunity. It does, even if it's scary, even if it's unfamiliar. So bring us to the point now where, because any entrepreneur knows that move,
it's terrifying.
Yeah. And it's enough a move to say, what? No, it's just too big. I don't want to do it. Let me have the safety of say my 9 to 5, and then you get let go or something, which I look at as a blessing. You never would have started your venture otherwise. So bring us to that time. I want to know the mind, because I am just investigating your mind. That's the mindset of when you, so now that period of time was up and it was time to become an entrepreneur. What were you thinking? What's going on? What made you say, like, here's the fear, hand, and then here's the unknown, and say, yes, this fear may be here, and there's certainly a lot of unknown, but this is my time, and I'm doing it now. Walk us through that.
Yeah, well, so this would have been 2016. And I recall telling my husband, I woke up one morning and I said, I'm done. And of course, I'm married to an engineer. I'm married to a very financially conscientious, minimalist engineer. And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, I'm tired of writing prescriptions. And I just woke up one day and I just said, there has to be a better way. There has to be a better way for individuals to be able to, for me to be able to impact more people than what I'm doing. And I just don't think just writing prescriptions is the way I want to go, because, unfortunately, we, as many people know, we've conditioned many, many people that a pill is going to solve a symptom, and that we're really not digging really deep. And that's not the traditional Western medicine way. And I want to be very clear. I respect, revere, appreciate, what my fellow colleagues are doing. I'm not being critical of them. I'm just saying the system is broken. And so for me, I got very frustrated that I would see someone who was younger than me, that was diabetic, that was obese, that was, having sleep apnea, fatty liver, all these things that are oftentimes lifestyle mediated. And I didn't have the structure in place within where I work to be able to support them the way that I wanted to, beyond just writing prescriptions.
And so even before you go any further, here, right, that moment is the exact time where someone would start taking something, because these are uncomfortable face to face. It's easier to say, well, I want to do something different, but I don't like this feeling. Where's the pill? That'd be a great time to do it. And we go for that, the food, drugs, the alcohol, work, TV, keeping busy, reckless behavior, or we actually face it, which, so you realized you were happy, and it sounds like you just started facing things. So what were you met with when you did?
Oh, well, it was I think the irony was, so that was February, and the nurse practitioner who oversaw all of us, I was part of a very large practice. She had, honest to God, had just fallen and had a major injury. And I had to call her because I knew I wanted to be done by April 1st. And here she is, she's recovering from this horrible injury. And I called her out of concern for her injury, but also I was like, I need to share something with you. And the first thing she said was, I knew this day would come. I knew that you were going to grow beyond where you were in this role, because they had done so much for me. I mean, they had given me every crazy schedule I wanted. They had reduced my hours. They were trying to keep me. What can we do to keep you? And I finally just said, it's really, generally, it's not you, it's me. Like, I need to do something different. And so I gave my notice, and I remember saying to my husband, I mean, every day I went to work, I cried because I loved the people I worked with. I
Mm.
had some really good friends. I'd been with this practice for 12 years. One of them in particular, a male physician, I'd gotten to know he and his family and his wife, and they were wonderful. And every day I worked with him, I cried. And this is
Mhm.
so, if anyone that hears me, they know I am not a crier. I cried. I mean, the nurses were like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "No, but I'm going to work through this." And what it really demonstrated for me was that it was this incredibly growthful period. I was mourning the loss of this role because I knew I would never be in that role again. I would always be a nurse practitioner, I may not be working in the way that I had been before. And so I left that job, and honest to God, I think I woke up the first day and I was like, gosh, I have all this flexibility. Like, I'm not used to this. I'm used to being in a hospital, in scrubs, running around, dealing with emergencies. And all of a sudden, for the first couple months, I kind of floated, and I was kind of, observing what types of people were attracted to me and my business role. And I remember my very first client, she didn't know that. And of course went above and beyond to serve her every need, because I really wanted her to be happy. But I think probably 6 months in is when I realized that I didn't have the training that I needed to be successful, and I had to invest in myself. So from a very early stage, I realized I needed a business coach. I had a very good one who I was with for a little over a year, but really shoved me to do some things. I was like, I can't write a program. And she was like, yes, you can. And so, by the, skin of my teeth, I was literally creating things on the fly. And, that kind of evolved into, having a different business coach, going to, retreats. And here's the big thing is you've got to invest in yourself. It is so critical. I know sometimes people get that scarcity mindset. Oh my God, I'm going to spend all this money. No, you're investing in yourself. You're ultimately going to make a better entrepreneur if you're doing that on a consistent basis and being strategic about it, because there are always people that will get you to spend your money on things you may not need. And so that's how it initially started. But I laugh at how how much easier things were back then, but I didn't realize it. But now it's like I really have a business, and so it's kind of like it's a machine that kind of plows itself forward. But I just recall being, I think my parents were stunned. They were like, "Why would you leave a six-figure job to go do something where you're not being paid?" And I can see where they were coming from. But I was like, ultimately, I can't believe I'm going to say this. I am not an employee. Like, I don't
Mm.
want anyone telling me how to work, how to do my job. I'm like, those days are done. And so, that kind of feisty sense of myself, there was no question I was going to be successful. I mean, there was never, I never woke up in the middle of the night fearing that I wouldn't be a success. I knew that I would be. And so again, it goes back to the mindset piece where I was like, this is what's going to happen. This is the direction we're going in. And for anyone that knows me or doesn't know me, I'm a huge introvert. So for me to get on video and be on social media and talking about things, I always, and sometimes people were surprised here I was an introvert. And I would say, well, when I'm in education mode, that's a part of being a nurse practitioner. That's integral to who we are. So I'm
Mm.
always educating. And if I think about it from that perspective, it doesn't seem quite so scary. And so just always kind of setting things to help. It's always about helping others. It's always being of service.
And and that's such an important piece, because when we start to give, it's off of and onto someone else. That confidence comes from just diving in and doing
Mhm.
it. When we just let the fear overtake us, stays and it grows. I
Mhm.
mean, when you think about it, that's there was this. It sounds like this tremendous confidence, and it just came from. It sounds like from what you're saying, taking things on, taking on
Mhm.
these challenges, overcoming the limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
There's two things. You mentioned having that call that day. There are so many people listening who they have to have these challenging, these these uncomfortable conversations, and it's they know they're out to face something. Was there something you did before you made call? Did you work yourself up in any way? Did you
No.
rehearse in your head? Did you do anything?
No, I didn't. I think I just spoke from the heart. And it was the same way
Even
when I
better.
spoke to this nurse practitioner, I spoke from my heart. And when she said to me, I knew this day was coming, she then understood where I was coming from. I said, I
Mhm.
love being a nurse practitioner. It's not about that. It's that I can't be as impactful as I desire to be by doing this. And I'm so grateful that I took that leap of faith, another, big leap of faith, because I've grown into the person that I've always been meant to be. And so, being an introvert, and whether people realize this or not, if you're an introvert, medicine's a great place to be, because you have so much control over things that go on. You can decide how extroverted or introverted you want to be. You're telling people what to do. This is the plan. This is the prescription. This is when you're coming back. These are the things to report. But I've been forced to grow in ways that are really interesting, to imagine I've got to sell someone on, every time I have a discovery call, getting on with people. And, it's more about, selling the outcome, but, having to communicate effectively. I now have a team underneath me that I love and I think of as family, and, helping to run a business and to treat people the way that I had always wanted to be treated as an employee, making sure that I'm doing that and being, it's an all women team. I always say it's team estrogen, but it's worked out really well. So I think that, for me, I think, my life could have turned out very differently, but I was always about doing something a little different, doing it on my terms, still being a good human. It's all about, running a business with integrity, but also being honest with myself. I mean, it would have been much easier to stay in my nurse practitioner job and be miserable, because I was just not happy with it. But I couldn't, because I lead with integrity. Every time I went to work, I was like, okay, I'm at work and I'm going to toe the party line because that is what I am paid to do. But inside I'm screaming because I'm looking at this patient saying, I could help you so much more if we could get you to sleep better and lose some weight and, eat less junk and all these other things. But I can't do that because I'm constrained in this role. And so, it's that feisty little kid that keeps coming out. I always think about that 7-year-old, that's ultimately, she's still in there, and she's the one that says to me, don't be afraid and don't fear. I don't fear. There's not a whole lot of fear after last year. There's not a whole lot. I always say that it's amazing how, if you have a major crisis in your life, then, you can sink or swim, and I'd rather swim. So.
And we're speaking to a community that has been through crisis for sure. And I love you mentioned the idea of grieving, the change in the relationship. We think we just grieve when we lose someone we love, but it's change. Any major change, there's a grieving process, and it's so wonderful because as you're going through this grieving, you're making sense out of it, you're making meaning out of it. It sort of lays the groundwork for your next, for your next stage and what you're ready for next. So what's the most important mindset strategy that you've?
I think reflection, and I think, brutal honesty with yourself. I have an ability to look objectively at myself, and sometimes it's not pretty. Like, I can objectively say, hey, I didn't put a good plan in motion, or I didn't think through that thoroughly, or I didn't realize the impact. And I always say self-reflection, self-evolution is really critical. And I think it differentiates us from people that want to fly at 30,000 feet. They don't want to see the truth, or they don't want to be honest with themselves or with their loved ones. And so I've always been able to do that. It sometimes pisses people off, frankly. But again, it's that internal kind of integrity. Like, I'm driven by a desire to try to live authentically and to live honestly. And so I think for me, that would probably be it. Even when I had that hospitalization last year, after I wasn't quite so sick and I could think again, I remember, having a day where I was looking out the window and it was snowing, and, just really thinking about, like, how do I want to get through this? Like, let's be honest, it can go one of two ways. How do you want to get through this? And I was like, there are two things that need to happen, and that's what I'm going to focus on. That's going to get me through this, because, all of us go through things, whether it's emotional pain, physical pain, psychological pain, etc. And so it's that mindset shift for me that has made all the difference. Like, just acknowledging, like, okay, let's reflect on what's going on. And I'm also very left brain. So it's like, what's the plan? Like, what do I need to focus on? Step one, and if I focus that way, then I can digest everything I need to go through. Literally.
Yeah, it's a great way to do it. And I just want to clarify because you mentioned brutal honesty, but I think there's
Mhm.
a big difference. I'm sure you'd agree with this between the brutal honesty and the criticism. It's
Yes.
not that you're being in a way that you're just looking to criticize yourself.
Right.
You're looking as a way to improve. Like I was brutally honest. Even as we started this podcast, I was supposed to be on Thea's podcast, and I totally botched up the time. And I thought it was, West Coast time, and it was Eastern. And so of course I was totally honest with myself about saying some choice words too, but it wasn't to criticize. It was just to be like, I need to show up a little differently so I don't do like that again. And that's what I think that's what really makes us stronger,
Mhm.
wiser, better, where we learn from our mistakes. So what do you make sure everyone learns and everyone knows as we wrap?
Mm. Well, I think, part of being a woman is that we are these incredibly intuitive beings. And I think it's absolutely critical that we are honest and forthright about what type of life we want to create for ourselves. I feel like many women start off on one path and they let that define them. And I would be the first person to say that, we easily can embrace limiting beliefs, but it's so important for us to understand that we can always make changes, even if they're small changes that ultimately will have a large impact, and having faith in the process, because sometimes things are really hard to make us ready for what's to come. And I truly believe, the universe takes and the universe gives. And my life has really lived that way, has played out that way. A good friend of mine that I've been friends with since 6 years old, which has been a long time. She,
Mm.
now that we're in our 40s, she always says, don't share with everyone how long we've known each other. And we were talking one day, and she said, we went to the same schools, we had very similar, lifestyles. She's like, look at where you are. And she said, it could have been so much different. And I said, yes. And so for anyone that's listening, you can always change your path. Reflecting on what's going on, finding the resources. I'm also a gigantic nerd, so I have hundreds and thousands of books in my house. So I'm always learning, being a lifelong learner, you can always learn something new. You can always make a change. There's always going to be a resource available, finding a tribe of like-minded individuals, finding people that make you feel good. I always say my girlfriends have made all the difference in my life. And for that, I'm very grateful. We're lucky if we get, a couple of really good friends, and I've had many throughout my lifetime. So I would just leave it with that there's always room to change, evolve, shift, and change in our lives. And just to have the faith that things will work out the way that they ultimately should.
Yeah, that or better, that or something better. Where do we go to learn more about you?
Yeah. So I'm all over social media, but I would say best place is probably my website, www.cynthiathurlow.com. I am on Twitter. I am on Instagram. I am on Facebook. I have it's open to everyone, but there's a private Facebook group called Intermittent Fasting Lifestyle / my name. And I'm just starting to grow my YouTube channel. So check me out there.
Very exciting, Cynthia. Thank you so much. You
Thank
just
you.
shared so much wisdom and insight, and we can strengthen and change. And there's just so much to dive in. I know you helped so many people with what you shared today.
Thank you. Have a great day.
There were so many things I loved about this conversation, and Cynthia is such a powerful example of someone who lives her life and leads with integrity, heart, strength, and clarity. Stay in touch with Cynthia by going to cynthiathurlow.com, and we'll have all of her information in the show notes at thepbtinstitute.com/podcast. Here's my biggest takeaway. Being brutally honest with yourself isn't the same thing as berating ourselves or negatively putting ourselves down. It's a powerful way of deconstructing our thoughts, behaviors, and actions so that we can learn from them. By being honest with ourselves, we can learn the drivers behind why we think the way we think and why we do what we do. And it's only from that space can we clearly see and make changes from there. And have you checked out the PBT Institute membership community? Imagine everything you'd ever need to become your physical, mental, and emotional best. Community, support, certified coaches and practitioners you can schedule time with, daily classes on all kinds of interesting topics, curated experts teaching advanced strategies in the areas of health, mindset, spirituality, personal development. Imagine the most friendly, welcoming, and supportive place to become your best, all online. Nothing like this exists, and I am so excited to welcome you. Just go to thepbtinstitute.com/join to learn more. Thanks for listening. Can't wait to be with you next time, and here's to your breakthrough.